Hello everyone, how are we doing today? We're going to be getting right back into our regional anatomy series. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on the hand, which we did last video, but this time we're going to do the muscles and the ligaments. So let's get into it. If we look at the hand, we can zoom in here. There's many ligaments of the hand that go between each of the bones. Now, to name these ligaments, all you need to do is go to the bone that it originates from, go to the bone it inserts from, and then essentially combine the two names together. Like for this one, for example, it goes from the pisiform bone to the hamate bone, and thus it is called the pisohamate bone. And that's pretty much the same for all of these ligaments right here. We've also got the ligaments in between the metacarpals. All these ligaments, combined with the ligaments in the carpals, help with that joint congruency, help stabilize the joint and keep the bones together. And that's how we form these wrist joints. Now, increasing the amount of layers, we can see these new things that form, and these are synovial sheaths. What these allow is for the ligaments of the muscles in the forearm to pass through, and they are lubricated by the synovial fluid within, allowing for smooth movement. It also helps stabilize it and prevent the bowing of the ligaments. Another very important ligament that arises when we increase the levels is this one right here. And you can see it goes kind of from the trapezium and the trapezoid bone all the way to the pisiform and the hamate bone. And this is known as the flexor retinaculum. And you can see all the synovial sheaths pass through here, which means the tendons are going to pass through there, which means that the flexor retinaculum actually holds the tendons in place. And its entire purpose is actually to prevent the tendons from bowing when you move your wrist. Now, what they mean by bowing is, if I were to flex my wrist like this, right, we know that the muscles lie in our forearm and the tendon goes all the way up to our fingers. Now, without that flexor retinaculum there holding the tendons in, when I do this with my hand, the ligaments would end up going like this and they'd be going across. And that's bowing, because you can kind of see a bow that forms there, right? So what the flexor retinaculum does, it prevents that, and the ligaments must travel under here before going to the phalanges. Similarly, we've also got one on the posterior side of the hand. This is known as the extensor retinaculum, because the extensor muscles are on the back of the arm. And once again, this prevents them from bowing. If we would extend the wrist like this, we can see that we've got these ligaments. I don't know if you can see that in my hand. We've got these ligaments that form here, and without that flexor retinaculum, these would begin to bow, and they would go across rather than going through the flexor retinaculum. And we can see the synovial sheaths for those ligaments passing through there. Furthermore, we've also got, if we go back to the anterior side, we've also got this large ligament here, which is known as the superficial transverse metacarpal ligament. And in the name, it's transverse. It goes across transversely and it attaches to all the metacarpals. Now, another very important thing is the extensor hoods of the hands. As they say, they're essentially a hood for the extensor muscles. If you go to a car, right, the hood protects the engine. The extensor hoods, what they do is they protect and provide a place for attachment for the extensor muscles at the top, as well as the flexor muscles. But they're called the extensor hood because if we go back over here, it kind of looks like a hood because it covers the bones where the extensor tendons are going to go through. Additionally, we've also got this kind of like four fibers that go through here, and we've got the transverse fibers that go through here. This is called the palmar aponeurosis. The reason why is because it's in the palm of the hand, so right here. You can kind of actually see it if you like flex your fingers, and essentially flexor muscles connect to this, specifically the palmaris longus, which connects to this, and once it pulls on it, it flexes the hands like this. It's actually involved in weak flexing, so some people don't need it anymore because it's not that important. And so there's a muscle in your forearm right here called the palmaris longus. Some people actually don't have the tendon for it, like I don't actually have the tendon for it. I've only got one tendon here, and there should be one right here for the palmaris longus. And the reason why is because people have evolved without it because they no longer need it. You know, we're no longer needing that extra bit of grip strength. And regardless of whether you have it or not, it doesn't actually matter too much, purely because the other muscles will just get stronger around it. And that covers all the ligaments of the wrist. Next, we'll move on to the muscles. So with the muscles, we're just going to work our way from deep surfaces to superficial surfaces. We can see we've got these small muscles that originate from a metacarpal, and they insert on the proximal phalanges of the digits that they are on. These are known as the palmar interossi. Now, if you remember interosseous membrane that's between the radius and the ulna, it kind of looks like that. It's in between the two metacarpals. It doesn't attach to this side, but that's what it looks like. We'll take the second digit, for example, the index finger. It originates from the first metacarpal, inserts on the medial base of the proximal phalange, and what it does is it helps adduct the finger. As we can see, it would be right here. It'd be right here, and it would attach right here on our finger. So if it attaches there, it's going to pull our finger in, and any finger that's on this side of the pointer finger, when it moves that way, it's going to be adducting, so it's going to be going in, decreasing the angle. Whereas if we were to do these fingers and they were to move that way, that would be abduction, be moving away from the joint. So that there is the middle finger, is the center line. Now in the case of the index finger, it's going to be adducting, and it's going to be adducted by this first palmar interossi. Now all the palmar interossi that we see here also adduct the finger, but you can see they're on different sides, and that's referring back to that midline I was talking before. Anything past the midline will be considered adduction, and anything before it will be abduction. Now in the case of this one, it's going to be pulling towards the middle finger, so it's going to be adducting towards that finger. Now, fun fact, if we were to move the middle finger, right, if we move that side to side like this, right, both times it's actually being abducted. You can't actually adduct the middle finger because there's nowhere to adduct it towards you. Now the muscles we're covering before were the palmar interossis. They attach on the palmar side, as you can see. So the palmar interossis are more closer to the palmar side. If we flick it over and go to the dorsal side, we've got these dorsal muscles here. These are the dorsal interossis. And what the dorsal interossis do, quite different to the palmar interossis, which adduct the fingers, the dorsal interossis are going to abduct the fingers or bring them away from the joints. And they have very similar attachments, just on opposite sides of each of the metacarpals. And that covers all the deep muscles in between the metacarpals of our joint. Now we'll move on to the groups of the muscles in the hand that are a bit more superficial. And the first group I want to cover are the thenar groups. The thenar group is this little bit of flesh right here. We can feel that if we flex our thumb, we can feel some muscles in there. It's right over here. And we've got this first one, which is known as the opponus pollicis muscle. The reason why is it helps the pollicis, or the thumb, conduct opposition. So if we remember what opposition is, it's the movement of the thumb towards any of the other fingers. Like this, we're oppositioning it, we're moving it towards. If we move it back, that's reposition. But right now we're focusing on the opposition of the thumb. And that's what this muscle here helps with. Now, more superficially in the thenar group, we can see these muscles here form. This muscle here is the flexor pollicis brevis. We know we've got once we get to the forearm muscles, we know there's a flexor pollicis longus. The flexor pollicis brevis is actually an intrinsic muscle, which means it originates from within the hand, right? And so it's going to attach onto the thumb, and it's going to help flex it. We've also got another one. We've also got another muscle in the thenar group that's on top of all of these, and it's the most superficial, and it's called the abductor pollicis brevis. We can see it attaches more laterally than the flexor pollicis brevis, and as such it allows it to abduct the thumb. And that covers the thenar groups. Now we also have the hypothenar group muscles, which are actually on the other side of the hand, and it's the other fleshy bit on the hand right there. What these allow to do is they connect to the digiti minimi, or the pinky finger, and they allow it to conduct some actions. The first muscle that we want to see is not actually this one on the top, but it's the one that's right underneath. And this is the opponus digiti minimi. It helps the pinky finger conduct opposition with the thumb. So when I do this with my thumb and pinky finger, the opponus pollicis is going to work to move the thumb, or the pollicis, all the way across to the pinky, and the opponus digiti minimi is going to do the same thing but with the pinky, like this. Alright, and we can see it attaches to the metacarpal of the small finger, or the pinky finger, and pulls it across like this. The next muscle is also underneath this abductor muscle here, and it's called the flexor digiti minimi. Like the flexor pollicis brevis, it helps flex the digit muscle, but intrinsically. Next, we can get to this muscle on top, and as I explained before, it's the abductor digiti minimi, helps abduct the pinky finger. We've also got this muscle up here. Now, it doesn't exactly act on the pinky finger, but it's still part of the hypothenar group, and its muscle name is the palmaris brevis. So we know how we have a palmaris longus muscle, right? We haven't actually covered it yet, but there's also a palmaris longus muscle, and it was the muscle I was talking about before, which sometimes doesn't have a tendon in some people. Now this one here, whenever we have a longus muscle, we've also got a brevis muscle. And so right here, we've got the palmaris brevis, which will also attach to the palmar aponeurosis, which we can't see here, which now once I increase the layers, we can see it attaches to the palmar aponeurosis. And what that'll do is it'll move the hypothenar grip towards the base when we flex out, when we grip like this. And that is all the intrinsic muscles in the hand, so the precision group of muscles. Now we're going to go to the extrinsic muscles that focus on the hand. Now in a previous video, I actually talked about this muscle here. It's called the supinator. If you want to see more about that, go to that video. It covers the regional anatomy of the elbow and all its muscles and ligaments. What I didn't cover in that video was this muscle right here. Okay, so what this is pronator quadratus. Now we can clearly see that it's in quite a square shape, or four-sided shape, and that's why it's called pronator quadratus, because it helps with pronation, but it also happens to be in the shape of a square. Now obviously that doesn't really help with the wrist or wrist movement, but it is something to consider, and it's at the distal end of the forearm. Now as we increase the muscular level, we can see quite a few new muscles up here. The first main one with 4 big tendons, which go all the way down to the distal phalanges of each of these fingers. This is known as the flexor digitorum profundus. The reason why it's known as the digitorum profundus is because it's deep. This muscle is actually very deep. It's one of the first muscles that we'll see today. And there's actually another one, another flexor digitorum, but it's the superficialis because it's right on top. And what this does, as it's in its name, it flexes all these digits like there and allows us to flex them all individually. You can see though, it doesn't actually connect to the thumb muscle. The reason why is because the thumb has its own set of muscles because it moves much more independently than the others. You'll find that if you move, like let's say I move my middle finger, we can see the other fingers kind of moving there. And that's because they've got tendons that originate from similar places. The next muscle that we can see is this one here, and this is to do with the thumb, right? It's the flexor pollicis longus. We talked about earlier the flexor pollicis brevis. You can't see it right now, but this one is the long aspect of it. So whenever we have a brevis muscle, we have a longus muscle. Whenever we have a longus muscle, we'll also have a brevis muscle. And here we can see that the brevis muscle will run and it'll go under the flexor retinaculum and it will attach to the distal phalange of the thumb, or the pollex. Now this muscle here, most laterally next to the supinator, is the extensor carpi ulnaris. And this is probably best seen if we rotate to the other side. So this is the flexor carpi ulnaris. Whenever we have carpi here, we're talking about wrist, because carpi or carpal means wrist. Okay, so if it's the extensor carpi radialis, it's going to extend the wrist. So it's going to be like this when I extend the wrist, and it's going to be attached on the same side as the radius. We can see the radius is obviously on this side here, okay, and it attaches on the same side of the radius. And for this one specifically, it attaches at the middle finger. Another muscle we can see is the extensor pollicis brevis. So once we increase the muscle layers, you'll see the extensor pollicis longus. But right now, we've got the extensor pollicis brevis, which attaches to our pollicis, or the thumb, on the proximal phalange. We've also got extensor indicis, which is a separate muscle for the index finger. Compared to fingers 3, 4, and 5, the indices has a lot more movement and can move a lot more by itself. Whereas if we move the ring finger here, it moves all the other fingers. Now the pinky finger and the indices finger, like the thumb finger, have their own individual muscles. And we can see here that the index muscle has its own extensor muscle, which attaches to the distal phalange. Now while we're on the back, we might as well continue with these extensor muscles. So the muscle we see is the extensor pollicis longus, this one here. Once again, attaches to the pollicis and attaches to the distal phalange and helps it extend the muscle. The next one we've got is the adductor pollicis longus. These muscles are complementing the brevis muscles that are intrinsically to the hand. And what this does is, you can see it attaches to the lateral side of the pollex and allows it to abduct, so move away from the joint. You can also see if we increase the layers, we get these couple of muscles that form. This muscle here is the extensor digiti minimi. As you can tell, it attaches straight to the extensor, and like the extensor indices, it helps extend the small finger by itself. So that's why we can pretty much bend it quite well. We've also got the extensor carpi ulnaris. Now we had the extensor carpi radialis before. That's because it's attached on the same side as the radius. This one attaches on the same side as the ulna. You can see it attaches on the same side of the ulna. That's the ulna there. It attaches on the same side. Now, we can also see this muscle here, and it's the extensor digitorum. Now, unlike the flexor side, which has a flexor digitorum profundus and flexor digitorum superficialis, on the extensor side, we only have the extensor digitorum. The extensor digitorum connects to all of the digits from 2 to 5, not the pollicis as I explained before, and it helps extend them on the back. And we can kind of see that ligament right there. I don't know if you can see it. You can see one of them pointing out a bit, and that's the extensor digitorum. I'll go back to the flexor muscles. Like the extensor group of muscles, we've also got the carpi radialis and the carpi ulnaris. So this here is the flexor carpi radialis because it attaches on the same side as the radius, this muscle right here. And that's, once again, when we grip something or flex our phalanges, it's going to grip the wrist and bring it in. Similarly, we've got the flexor carpi radialis because it's on the same side as the radius, and that with the flexor carpi ulnaris, which is right on this side, will contribute to wrist flexion when we flex the wrist or grip it like this. Now, if you remember early in the video, I talked about the palmaris brevis muscle. Here is the subsequent palmaris longus muscle, which will attach to this palmar aponeurosis. We can see it attaches to right at the start of the palmar aponeurosis right there. And that covers all the muscles in the forearm and in the hand. Now, I'll do a quick explanation of what intrinsic versus extrinsic muscles are for. So, extrinsic muscles is when they go from one section of let's use the upper limb, for example. It goes from one section of the upper limb to the next section of the upper limb. That's the intrinsic muscle because it crosses a major joint. All right, but intrinsic muscles are when they don't cross any major joints and they go, let's say, from one region and it inserts in the exact same region. For example, palmaris brevis, that goes from within the hand and it inserts within the hand, whereas the palmaris longus originates from the forearm and inserts in the hand. And so that's going to be an extrinsic muscle, while the palmaris brevis is going to be the intrinsic muscle. Now, the difference between the extrinsic and intrinsic muscles is that the intrinsic muscles help with precision grip. So when we're using a pen, when we're writing, when we need really precise movements, we'll use our intrinsic grip. Our extrinsic grip, or our power grip, is when we need to, carry something heavy or grab it around. We do it like this. We don't need too much accuracy. We just need raw power to be able to lift it up. And that's the difference between the two. That finishes the regional anatomy for our upper limb. Feel free to let me know in the comments whether or not I made any mistakes. Other than that, have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.